Please make sure your microphones are on and take the roll, please.
Trustee Spurling?
Here.
Trustee Lee?
Yes.
Trustee Hines? Trustee Youngerman?
Yes.
Yes.
Trustee Bond?
Yes.
All right, we have a quorum. Number 4 on the agenda, public participation. Item A would be public comment. If there's any member of the public here this evening that would like to address the board, now is your opportunity. Herschel.
HL. First, I want to congratulate the new officers here in the new board here in the community. I didn't get to make the last meeting, but I'd like to do that. I'm Herschel Luckenbill. I live right here in Montgomery. I'm a veteran, Vietnam veteran, and I am a veterans advocate for all veterans. Back in December, I had an opportunity, or I drove by the Riverside Cemetery, and this is what I saw. I saw a Spanish-American War cannon that was literally falling to the ground. Rusted, rotted, 150 coats of paint on it, and I couldn't stand it. So, Jimmy, next picture, please. Up the other way. You got to peek early. You can see all the paint and all the rot and all the rust, the spokes missing. And it made me sick to my stomach to see that we had let this history go this far down. But I took it upon myself to form a committee. I went to work. I found, come to the village, asked for your permission, or for your blessing, and got this lovely lady Heidi here to bake some stuff for our fundraiser. They were good. But I went to work. I got a sandblasting company out of Yorkville, Fox Valley Sandblasting. I've got a gentleman out of Colorado who is a wheelwright who made the wheels for us. And we'll go to the next photo, please. That's, you can see just how bad the cannon was, what shape it was in, and the lack of respect that we were giving the soldiers that fought during that time. Next photo, please. Next photo, please. All right, this is after we got the wheels made out in Colorado, and beside all of the spokes and fellies, the fellies is the part around the ring, around the rim before the rim goes on. We had a public display out at Lion Farm where we heated up the rims to 850 degrees, made them expand, dropped them down over the wheel, and then quenched them in cold water so that they would fit and snug in the rims and work perfect. It's just amazing the technology and the skills that Mr. Rod Henderson had when he measured those wheels and made that fit. Next photo, please. This is where we were heating up the rims. We had to get them up to 850 degrees, and we don't take a thermometer and stick it in there. We take a piece of wood, we rub it on those rims, and if the wood catches on fire, we got it too hot, so we got to cool it off and cool it off a little bit, because it's we don't want the rims to burn the wheels. Next photo. All right. This is after it got down to the sandblaster, and I went down to Yorkville, and this is what I saw, and there was a bucket of boats sitting beside it also. I said, oh my God, they'll never get it put back together. But 2 weeks later, Jamie, where did you go? This is after it was sandblasted, and it was just beautiful. I mean, in this condition. Oh, we had our dedication on Sunday, and our guest speaker was Teddy Roosevelt himself, a.k.a. Joe Whelan, out of Eastern Illinois. He did a great job, gave a great speech. We had over 200 people at our dedication. The village furnished ice cream, thank you very much, and water. Next photo. This is the crowd. We'll go to the next photo. This is our new cannon. I want to thank you for letting me take part or be a part of bringing back history to Montgomery. And I want to recommend everybody volunteer for a project this year and help this board out. Thank you.
And I will just add briefly, I said this on Sunday out there, this kind of project doesn't happen without people like Herschel in your town. So again, a round of applause for Herschel for. All right, moving on. Is there anybody else that would like to address the board this evening? Hearing none?
I would, sorry. And I'm not sure if this is the appropriate time or not. You told me once to just go ahead and I'll stop you if you're wrong. There was something that happened this past week in our community that most people probably aren't aware of. I know Teresa is, and I know Steve are, because I saw them there. Friday night, a couple of folks in our community knew some folks in Moore, Oklahoma, and someone had reached out and was looking for some donations for specific things. They started a Facebook campaign, posted it. Over 40 families donated, showed up Friday night. They had scouts there, parents, community members, all come together, gather the stuff up, pack it into a truck. One of a friend's father was headed to Texas and volunteered to drop it off in Oklahoma on his way down. So it's that type of thing that I think is, you know, kind of like what Matt just said about Herschel, is that's what makes the community a great place. And I'm not sure what we can do as a board or anything to recognize that type of activity, but it was a great thing to see happen. I mean, the people that were there donating and volunteering all had smiles on their faces. It was just a great time and a great thing for everyone to do. So I just wanted to make sure people were aware of that.
Absolutely. Thank you. Move on to item B, which is the presentation of the Metro West drive down to Springfield. For those of you that might not be aware, the village, through the Metro West Council of Government, goes down to Springfield to lobby on your behalf once a year, usually in the spring, in April or May. And this year, from the village of Montgomery, we had myself, Steve Youngerman, Jeff Zofel, Jamie, and Lauren. And then our attorney and engineer who represent Metro West were down there as well. But we had a pretty successful trip by most measures. We met with the comptroller, Judy Bar-Topinka. And I'll pass this around for the board to see and for anybody else that's interested. Metro West provides us with a packet of information that you can pass it that way if you like, that we kind of focus on in the 2 days that we're down there, primarily the first day, and the talking points that we're down there to hit on. So protecting our local government funds and public safety pensions were two of the issues that we talked about. We ended up meeting with all of our representatives from Montgomery, and I made a list here that I'm trying to find while I talk, of the representatives that we met with. We met with Representative Chapalavia, Tom Cross, Kay Hatcher, Linda Holmes, Stephanie, we didn't meet with Stephanie Kifowit in Montgomery, but, gosh, now you guys got me. Karen McConaughey, Jim Oberweis. And then we had the fortune of sitting down with the governor the second day. He actually requested a meeting with Metro West, kind of bolsters the credibility of the organization, that he wanted to sit down with us in his office and talk about long-term water planning and his water program. So that's the Montgomery officials that were down there. What else we got? And then I think there were 5 mayors from this area. There's Jeff and I with Brian LeClaire from Oswego. And I think that's about it on the presentation. If there's any questions, of course, we can answer any. I'd like to pass that stuff around just so the board can see what staff and the officials do while we're down there lobbying on your behalf. So if anybody from the board is interested in going in next year, let us know and we'll figure that out. So if there aren't any questions, I'll segue right into the next update, which is the presentation on the Recon Conference. You'll start to realize that we've been pretty busy in the last 2 weeks. Came back for 2 days and then took off to Las Vegas for the ICSC Recon Convention, which is the retail and commercial convention that they have every year in Vegas. And I went, our economic development director went, and Jamie went as well. So that was kind of a completely different experience. We sat down, we had appointments to sit down with brokers, landowners, one of them being out of state that we actually couldn't meet with unless we went out there, restaurants, retail, all kinds of commercials. So we were on the ground there for 2.5 days and did more than 80 hours worth of physical work on behalf of Montgomery. I will pass this around too. She started passing hers around. This is the binder that staff put together for us in our endeavor out there. I'll pass this way so you guys can see. Basically, it's the marketing material that we have for our vacant properties, or the TIF project we were all, approaching people on as well. So we made some excellent contacts, and I'll see if Jamie or Shar have a few words to add on that trip.
I will just comment that I have heard since we returned from several developers that we've been working with, that they are very excited about what's coming to Montgomery, and that they are very appreciative of outreach efforts when President Brawley and ourselves come down on behalf of Montgomery, that it makes their jobs a lot easier of welcoming people to our community. Thank you.
Shar, do you want to? Yeah, sure. Come on down.
I'll just take 1 second. I know it's a long meeting. I just think it was a great opportunity for us to pull together the business community, the development, the developers, as well as talk about administration and the board. So it was really exciting. People recognized us. People said hello, Montgomery, and we said hello back. So we plan on doing a lot of great things, and we're excited to have worked for all of you. So thank you.
Thank you, Shar. If there's any questions on that, we can answer any certainly now or at any time. If not, we'll keep the meeting moving along because we have a long one this evening. So move on to the consent agenda. You can see before you A through F. I'll summarize briefly. We have the minutes of our village board meeting on the 13th, accounts payable and receivable, the village president emergency succession plan, the Big H Carnival permit, and the revised meeting schedule for the rest of 2013. And if there isn't any comment, I'll entertain a motion to approve the consent.
Move to approve.
Second.
Moved in second. Any discussion? Take the roll, please.
Trustee Lee?
Yes.
Trustee Heinz? Trustee Youngerman?
Yes.
Trustee Marisak?
Yes.
Trustee Bond?
Yes.
Trustee Spurling?
Yes.
And the motion carries 6-0. Move on to items for separate action. Item A is the revisions to the village's revolving loan fund recapture strategy statement. And I will turn it over to Jeff Zilfel for this.
Thank you, President Brawley. The village has a revolving fund. It was originally funded by the state, and we used to provide low-interest loans to businesses, either to entice them to expand or retain them. We're recommending some changes to the policy. We haven't amended it since 2005. And we thought while we're doing that, it'd be a good time to have our consultant, Freddie Schmuddy, come and just speak with the new board about a revolving fund program and just kind of give you some background, some education. So I'm going to ask her if she can come to the podium now and address you. And I did pass out a handout from her to all of you this evening. You just have your place.
Thank you, Jeff. As Jeff said, the village has had a revolving fund policy statement that was most recently approved in 2005. And before I talk about some changes that have been recommended, what I thought I would like to do is to just go back for a moment. And the handout that you have, the second page of it has this sort of flow chart on it. And I did that intentionally to try and present a very brief overview of where these funds came from originally. They were supposed to move forward without any baggage, and it didn't happen quite that way. As you can see, the dollars were originally federal funds. And the Village of Montgomery, back, about 14 years ago, had two projects that basically served to capitalize your revolving fund. Those funds, those projects, were actually funded by the state of Illinois because the federal funds for smaller communities, of which Montgomery is considered, the program is administered by the state of Illinois. Now, Montgomery is somewhat unique in that you have a choice. Kane County is what is considered, according to federal rules and regulations, as an urban county. So they get a predetermined formula amount of funds from the federal government every year. And every 3 years, the communities in Kane County who make up the population eligibility have an opportunity to either opt in or opt out, meaning their population goes towards the county's eligibility or it's subtracted. For as many years as I can recall, Montgomery has always opted out of the county's program. There were a couple of years, I believe, that the village did participate in order to get some housing rehab or perhaps some infrastructure money. But generally, particularly for economic development purposes, the village has opted out so that it could get direct funding from the state of Illinois. The money goes from the State Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity to the village of Montgomery. The village then loaned the funds. One project was for Aurora Industries, the other was for Fox River Foods, total of $800,000. The village loaned that money to those two businesses, and those two businesses repaid the loans to the village of Montgomery, so that the interest and principal repaid stayed in the village and served to capitalize your revolving fund. There are about 190 revolving funds across the state, and they have gone, quite frankly, unmonitored by the state for a number of years, and that whole philosophy, as Jeff well knows, has changed, and the state is now monitoring the program significantly because the feds are requiring them to, as they should. On the next page, what I tried to do is to give you an idea as to what program requirements there are and where they come from. You have a revolving fund that is the village's fund, but as I mentioned earlier, it does come with a little bit of baggage. And that baggage, quite frankly, is the federal, state, and local requirements. The federal requirements are through that particular section of the Federal Register. The state requirements through the Joint Committee of Administrative Regulations, JCAR, has its own rules. And as I'll explain in a minute when we talk about the changes to your statement, the federal rules and the state rules are not necessarily the same, and we are required to follow both. So it gets a little confusing. We then have the recapture strategy statement that the Village of Montgomery approves, submits to the state for their review and approval, and we're required to follow that. On the next page of the handout, I tried to go through what the requirements of a recapture strategy statement actually are. And as you see in the 5 boxes on the left, those are the categories of items that the state and, ironically, the feds both require be in your recapture strategy statement. And the items to the right are the ones that are included in the revisions to and in the original Montgomery statement. The last page in the handout is a summary of the revolving fund from a financial perspective. And you'll see that those two original projects that were approved in the amount of $800,000 actually allowed you to approve $3.7 million worth of revolving fund projects. And over the course of the 24 years that Montgomery has had a revolving fund project, you have more than tripled the initial capitalization. So it is an incredible tool for the village for economic development. And it's going to be critical in the months, certainly years, but I believe months to come, that the fund becomes very active, so there is no opportunity for the state to try and take any of that money back. They are doing it. There are a lot of communities, let me rephrase that, there are some communities across the state that have used their dollars for clearly ineligible expenses. And the state is requiring repayment where there has been no activity for 15 or 20 years, they're taking those dollars back. So we want to make sure that that doesn't happen in the case of Montgomery. And Montgomery's portfolio, all of your loans have been, there was one that was a default and a legal settlement. All of the others have been paid in full, and there's currently one that's active. So it's about time that we consider additional revolving fund projects. That brings me to the revised revolving fund policy statement. There are really only 5 major changes in the revolving fund policy statement that was in your board packets and what was approved in 2005. The first one is the name. For whatever the reason, we've always called it the Revolving Loan Fund Program, the RLF. The state decided, and God knows how many meetings it took to do it, they decided to call it the revolving fund. So to be consistent, everything is now changed to make it a revolving fund instead of a revolving loan fund. The second change is under eligible uses of funds. What was included in that particular, or what was excluded in the 05 version was a reference to all eligible community development block grant activities. The state's rules, and this goes back to the inconsistencies, the state's rules don't permit any CDBG eligible activity, but the federal rules do. So as long as we're consistent in this instance with the federal language, we're fine. So we certainly don't want anything to be restrictive. We want to be able to use funds for anything that is eligible under the CDBG federal program. The third change in the policy statement has to do with the assurances all the way down at the end. Most of the other red line that you see on the screen are grammar changes or reorganization. There's no substantive changes in that red line. Under the assurances, however, I took the job creation requirements of $15,000 per job. I took it out of an earlier section and put it in the assurance section because that's where the state likes to see it. The fact that it was in the statement, same sentence, is irrelevant. They wanted it here. The same is true with the statement underneath it as it relates to the minimum leverage ratio of $1 of non-revolving fund for every $1 of revolving fund project. The last item under assurances is a change. We are now required to include the fact that we will follow the federal prevailing wage rate and do all of the environmental reviews. We've been doing it. We've always done the environmental reviews, and we've always required, we've said that we require prevailing wage rate adherence. We've never had any projects that I'm aware of where it would have applied, but if it had, we would have done it. They want that in the assurance section. Those are the only changes, so it's not major, but it makes it consistent, and I think it's important that we have an updated version so that we are current when revolving fund projects come before you for consideration. I'd be glad to answer any questions related to the revolving fund or to the revised changes or to the history of the program.
Are there any questions of Freddie?
That's our existing balance as per.
Yes, sir. That balance is current as of today, Jeff, or?
Is there a possibility of growing this fund on Montgomery's behalf?
Pardon me?
Can we still get more dollars, or?
The way the program works is you are certainly eligible for more funding as long as you have no more than $15,000 balance in your revolver. If you have a positive balance, which obviously Montgomery does, you're required to use that first. If that balance is down to 15,000-ish, then, and there's a new project, absolutely we go in for more money.
What are the possibilities of receiving those funds, do you think? If we were to loan this amount out and we had essentially zero in our account, with the fiscal and financial state of the state of Illinois, what are the chances of getting some of that money?
It's a really good question, and that's actually part of the reason I wanted to do that flow chart. If you go back, we're not talking about state dollars. That's the beauty of this. These are federal dollars that are administered by the state. The state can't do anything with these dollars other than fund the Community Development Assistance Program. That's all it can do. So there isn't an opportunity for the funds to be shifted to any other account.
So the communities that aren't using their funds and the state pulls that back, they can't use it for anything else? They now have to disperse it to another community that's looking to use those funds, or what can
No,
they do with that?
If the state recaptures funds from communities that aren't using it, it goes back into the community development pool. So that, for example, if Montgomery had a project, those funds could be used for economic development by anybody who's eligible for the program. And then there's a new allocation every year of funds. This year, because of the federal budget, Illinois' allocation was about $9 million less. So we're right about $27 million this year for the program. And they reduced economic development from 8 million, I believe, to either 5 or 6 million for the next program year, which begins in January.
So it's in our best interests to loan that money out so we can go for more.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions?
What's the rate right now?
Pardon me?
What's the rate right now?
The rate that the village would loan the money at? The revolving fund policy statement allows the village board to make that decision. There isn't a set rate. The only requirement is that it be an interest, it has to be an interest-bearing loan. You can't do interest-free, and you can't do a forgivable loan. But quite frankly, based on interest rates across the state right now, we're doing a lot of 1% loans.
Right. I think that's why a lot of the people paid their loans back, is that they could borrow from a bank cheaper than what the loan was at that time that they were, had to have the money at.
In some communities, that's absolutely been the case. Part of the reason that Montgomery has such a positive balance was an early repayment of the Fox River Foods loan. Otherwise, we wouldn't be as positive as we are. But when that company sold, the loan was repaid in full.
What rates are you seeing other communities loaning out their revolving fund money at now?
1 to 2%, nothing higher than 3 anywhere.
So it's essentially free money, almost.
Yeah, you could consider it that, yes, sir.
Yeah.
One other thing I wanted to mention that's a little bit different in Montgomery's recapture statement, and I think it's a good idea. There is an application fee, and it's $2,000, and it can be waived by the village board. And that was done probably maybe 2009, 2010, sometime around then. And it was done because the village was getting a lot of garbage proposals and frankly, just garbage projects that were taking a lot of staff time and a lot of time where I would come out and meet with the proposed applicant and we'd go through the project and Steve would go through the project with him, and they never went anywhere. And we came to the conclusion that it really wasn't a good use of time or resources, but you also don't know until you really start pursuing something whether or not it's going to materialize. And so if somebody just wants to talk to you about it, they're probably not going to pay that $2,000 deposit. If the project goes through, then the funds are refunded. Thank you very much. I look forward to coming back soon with a good project.
Thank you.
Thank you, Freddie. there any more comments on this, we'll accept a motion to approve the revisions to our statement here.
So moved.
Moved by trustee Youngerman,
Second.
second by trustee Lee. If there's any discussion, and take the roll, please.
Trustee Youngerman.
Yes.
Trustee Marisak.
Yes.
Trustee Bond.
Yes.
Trustee Spurling.
Yes.
Trustee Lee.
Yes.
Trustee Heinz.
Yes.
And the motion passes 6-0. On to item B, recommendation of Plan Commission for the special use for outdoor storage for JPC Tree Care LLC, and I will ask Jamie for her update. And then-
Thank you. Just in relationship, the next two items, B and C. B is actually the recommendation from the Plan Commission, which was, the motion passed 5-1 to approve the special use as attached. So the first item is the recommendation, and then the second item is actually the ordinance that creates the special use for the property. There has been a few new developments in this item that the owner of the property, Colleen Long, is here tonight, this evening, and has asked to address the board. So if she's willing to do so, I would like her maybe to do that first, if that pleases the board.
Are they gonna ask for mulch? I don't want no mulch.
Good evening, trustees and staff. As you may know, I represent Aurora Blacktop, a company that's been in the construction business for over 65 years. A staple in Montgomery, located on Sard Avenue, we are a well-respected company that's remained family-owned for its entire existence. We installed many of your driveways, attended golf outings, and other various Montgomery charitable events, donating our time and our money to building a better Montgomery. We would still be in operation today if several developers actually paid us for the work we did. Liquidating almost all of our assets was not something that we wanted to do, but what were our choices? As you know, we still own the property on Sard Avenue, and we paid over $24,000 in annual real estate taxes on this property in 2012. In hopes of generating enough income to cover that annual tax bill, we made the decision to rent our property. We interviewed several small businesses, all with different potential uses. After much discussion, we carefully chose JPC Tree Care, an up-and-coming landscaping business whose intended use was not hazardous, offensive, or objectionable by reason of odor, dust, cinders, gas, fumes, noise, vibrations, radiation, refuse matter, or water-carried waste. This tenant would underutilize the M2 zoning that comes with the property. JPC would use the property to store raw materials and equipment, no different than we've been doing for 50 to 60 years. Please understand that in 1981, the Village of Montgomery granted ABT a special use permit without restrictions, allowing us to store raw materials outside. We are going from tar and asphalt to wood chips and mulch. These are the same things that most of you use to make your yard look pretty. Their use is in keeping with the vision of the area. As Mr. Chipman said in the minutes of April 4th, a landscaping business with a special use for outdoor storage is allowed in the M2 manufacturing zoning district and generally expected. How did we get to this point in the process? I feel as though we got off to a confusing and rather unproductive start for several reasons. Looking back at the April 4th Plan Commission Advisory Report, I'd like to take a minute to address an important issue. Planner Chipman states, "The petitioner currently rents the property, but has the opportunity to purchase a portion of the property in the future." This statement is false. At this time, the petitioner is no longer a third party. It's me, Colleen Long. I believe everyone involved at this point had good intentions, but proper protocol was not followed to ensure a fair process. With that, I want to be clear. Here are the facts. JPC Tree Care is currently renting 1065 Sard Avenue from us, and they have a lease that's expiring in December of this year. Aurora Blacktop has already been issued a special use permit on this property without restrictions. It was updated in 1981. We are not willing or able to pave any additional areas of the property as our outstanding environmental concerns are taking precedence. The currently paved area in the south part of the property is not large enough to accommodate the 10-foot tall raw material pile that they need to store to continue operation. The cost of installing an 8-foot tall board-on-board fence is impractical, quoting it at $11,000 to $15,000 for the install, plus the expensive and time-consuming cost to maintain it. The tenant is not the petitioner. I am. The tenant requested a special use. I did not. I am requesting a deviation from the current ordinance, granting permission to store raw materials on an unpaved area. The previous petitioner, the tenant, in an effort to please the community, agreed to some costly concessions for fear that the local municipality would shut his business down. So how does a landscaper work without mulch? JPC Tree Care is grinding up trees and limbs, as he's always done in the past, and now he's hauling that material to the infamous Rathbone site. He's paying money to dump it there. Then JPC is driving over to Rathbone, and he's spending more money every time he has a job to spread mulch, and he's paying for that again. Not allowing JPC to store mulch on site is sending profits and income from taxes on the sale of mulch directly to the city of Aurora. Montgomery loses twice. We understand that when authorized by the new ordinance, all outdoor storage can exceed 10 feet, and we're agreeable to this restriction. Storing mulch is really such a small but instrumental part in what JPC Tree Care does. They're on the approved list with the state of Illinois, they're clearly very educated on ash borer, and they've continued to successfully secure contracts with major corporations, cities, and villages. They've even worked on negotiations with you, the village of Montgomery. John Cordero, owner of JPC Tree Care, said back in his letter in February, "We like Montgomery, a quiet village, but friendly for business." So what are we asking you tonight? We're asking you to acknowledge the special use without restrictions that already exists on our property. We're asking for a deviation from the current zoning ordinance that requires us to pave an additional area to store raw material. Storing gravel on gravel makes a lot of sense, but forcing us to pave a lot to store gravel on, I think that's like asking somebody to wipe before they poop. It doesn't make a lot of sense. I hope we can all take this opportunity to welcome JPC into the neighborhood. I hope we don't respond negatively by shutting the doors on small business and destroying the American dream. With 14 jobs and growing, please help us keep this business in Montgomery. In closing, I'd like to address the board. You mentioned throughout the campaign, back to reason. Let's be real, let's address this situation in reality. Let's do the best thing for the community in the least intrusive manner. This property is zoned M2. These are my expectations. If we can't find a way to make this work for one of the most benign users possible, I assure you, it will sit empty. It'll become the eyesore that everybody fears. It'll become a stomping ground for troubled youth, drug users, gang members. We'll leave the buildings up only because we can't afford to knock them down. We will sit back and we will slowly watch this property deteriorate with you. This is an opportunity to embrace small business and send a positive message. If not a tree service, then who? Moving this tenant to a new community is an avoidable option at this point. Let's work together, amending the current special use that we already have, allowing mulch instead of 800-degree smelly tar and asphalt. The Planning Commission approved a new special use for this property by voting 5-1. Let's simplify the process by amending our current special use permit, as I'm sure the Village of Montgomery has already been flooded with an abundance of inconsistent special use permits. Aurora Blacktop has built their home here. We were lucky enough to have the opportunity to thrive here for many years. We are only asking that the same opportunity be awarded to JPC Tree Care. Your decision tonight will affect a lot of people's lives. Thank you.
Thank you, Colleen.
I do just have a couple comments with regard to that, to what Colleen just went through. And first of all, thank you, Colleen, for coming tonight and for addressing the board to help clarify. The attached special use ordinance that is on tonight's agenda that was recommended by the Plan Commission, it does do a couple things. It does limit the outdoor storage to the area that is currently paved and require fencing, basically screening from the residences. So as she had mentioned while she was talking, their desire there is to use space that is in excess of the restrictions that's in the attached ordinance, as well as, I believe, to not fence the area. So that's sort of where the difference is from the petitioner is compared to the special use ordinance on the agenda. It does not restrict mulch versus wood chips. I know that came up in a discussion. If granted as proposed, they would be able to store outside on the pavement screen mulch or wood chips. I just wanted to clarify that point. I wasn't sure, and if it's okay with the board, I'd like to ask Colleen, at one point, she was wanting this ordinance on the agenda tabled. It sounds like she's asking for an amendment, and not a table, or if you can't have an amendment, what precisely are you asking?
That's an excellent question. If you're acknowledging the special use permit that was given to us and granted in 1981, and you're acknowledging that, then what I'm seeking is an amendment to the current ordinance, or a deviation, if you will, from the current ordinance. If you're not going to acknowledge the 1981 special use permit, then I guess we're in the right place applying for a new special use permit. But again, I'm still seeking either a variance or a deviation from the current zoning ordinance that requires us to pave additional ground to store these raw materials.
Attorney Anderson, would you mind addressing the 1981 special use ordinance as well as the petitioner's request regarding the variance?
Sure. I will have to ask a question about the second part of that I didn't understand. But as to the first part in this 1981 special use ordinance, it is not, as the speaker indicates, an unrestricted special use. Unfortunately, in 1981, they didn't write down their special use ordinances very well, in that they didn't make the sorts of findings that we do now and try to establish exactly what the conditions are. That doesn't mean there are no conditions, however. When you don't say anything, then you have to look at what the property was actually used and permitted for, which was for an asphalt plant, not plant, but was it a plant?
It was an asphalt paving contractor.
Thank you. An asphalt paving contractor. That does not mean that anything under the sun can go in there simply because it has a special use. It means an asphalt paving contractor can use that facility. So, for example, if I flipped it around, I would ask you to consider if we had granted a special use for mulch originally, and then one day an asphalt paver showed up and started piling asphalt there, would you think the grant of a mulch special use would grant you an asphalt use? The answer is no, it wouldn't. It would be a different special use process. The reverse is likewise true. When you get a special use, it's customized to that use and that use alone. Moreover, when they stopped operations, there's a very good argument they've abandoned that special use. So when a new use comes in, it has to be compared with the existing current ordinance to determine compliance. In this case, that's exactly what the Plan Commission did, and that's how you find yourself where you are here today. So I respectfully disagree with her assertion that the 1981 special use still exists or is valid. At best, if they wanted to bring another asphalt paving company in, they could. And I recognize that you disagree with me. The second part you asked me to address, though, was about the paving, the requirement of additional paving.
The petitioners request that she's seeking the variance from the existing ordinances through this current special use. Is that your desire, Colleen?
No, the special use has nothing to do with the deviation that I'm seeking from the current ordinance.
All right, a deviation is not recognized by Illinois law per se. There are variances and there are special uses. And sometimes you get a combination of both, where somebody wants to do a little bit of everything. However, there is no petition before you right now for a deviation, if there even was such a thing. So there's nothing for you to act on.
I just have a question for you. Your concern really revolves around the paving issue, not so much the fence issue, or both, or the whole process?
You know, I think the fencing issue, we could probably work together on. We could come up with the money. It's really more the paving. I feel like, I appreciate what the attorney said, but I feel like the use hasn't changed. Were we an asphalt paving contractor? We were, but we stored raw materials outside. That was our use. Our use was outdoor storage for 60 years. We stored cold mix, salt, dirt, gravel. That's what we did for 60 years. Run back on the Google pictures, that's all we did. We didn't manufacture anything. That is what JPC is asking to do. They're asking to store that same stuff on the property like we have for 60 years. So has the use changed? No. I feel like we're confusing the use changing with the contractor changing. Has the contractor changed? Yes. But the use has not. The use has always been outdoor storage. I guess an analogy I could give you is, let's just say we're ABT and we're the asphalt contractor, and let's say we rent it out to a concrete contractor. Are you telling me that you want me to apply for a separate special use permit because they're going to be storing concrete, which is a raw material, because the use has changed? That would be silly, right?
How about, thank you for your comments, and if you don't mind, we'll deliberate the board, see what the board feels on this. I kind of see a few different options. One, you've requested that we kind of move on the fly and change things, which generally kind of circumvents our whole process. The other option would be to table this entire process or the special use this evening, which, correct me if I'm wrong, would mean that the current user is in violation of our ordinance.
Continues to be in violation.
Continues to be. Or the third option, which you can correct me if maybe this isn't the correct path, we could approve the special use tonight, and they can store on the hard surfaces and work towards the fence, and you could apply for whatever it is that you need to apply for.
A
going through
variance.
Plan Commission. Right, either a variance or a special use or whatnot.
That is an additional option.
Okay.
I have a question. Because I was on Plan Commission when this came through, I remember us discussing, the residents that came in were concerned about the runoff from the mulch. Now, if we put it on a hard surface, then it's potentially running off. If we put it on a permeable surface, we don't necessarily have that issue.
Yeah, can I answer that?
Sure.
We actually did an investigation after the Plan Commission meeting that we were at about that issue, because we needed to, it was alleged that the surface underneath there actually was paved, and Jared, you're here, it is paved. We were able to determine that, which kind of eliminated that issue, because they are on an improved surface. So I'm not exactly sure what additional paving is required.
So why are we making them do it again?
The only, right now, as the special use is presented this evening, the Plan Commission restricted the area they could store to just the current pavement. And they kind of defined the boundary as the current pavement only. If, and then they stated, and it was kind of their feeling, that if the petitioner wanted to expand the storage onto the grass or the other area, then they would be required to pave and therefore, and would be required to provide the proper drainage. So that's why, and at that time, come back for an amendment to the special use that would create a larger area. So the Plan Commission was very specific in limiting the area to which they are currently allowed to store the
Does
materials.
JPC have a problem with the area that's they're being limited to?
Yes. It's too small.
What changed, sir? Because when we met out there in the rain, I remember it well, you didn't have a problem with that.
No, what it changed is we have like 3 acres and you guys minimize me to, how many square feet?
.25, it's a quarter acre.
No, I understand that. We were out there in the rain together, and we talked about that specifically, and you said that's fine.
It is fine when we talked before before the board member minimized my space. When we talked before, it was fine when we started the mulch, and we saw the drain was draining towards the back of the river, which fine, but by that point, the site was great. But by now, you guys have minimized my business.
Drainage was not the question.
No, drainage was not a problem. We're saying.
Jared, when we were out there,
May I,
please.
may I address?
Yep.
Yeah, you can come up to the microphone.
Was it a visual thing?
What do you mean?
My concerns, even when I was on Plan Commission, the concerns that I had with the residents were, they were concerned about the smell, and they were concerned about the runoff. And then we were concerned about the emerald ash borer. But it seems now information had come to light since that meeting that you're certified with the state. As long as the mulch issue is solved.
Maybe Jared can clarify, but when we were out there, we saw the size and scope of his operation. So unless you've expanded your operation significantly, what you had was on paved surface. So that was a resolved issue. We saw that because you didn't have to pave anything more, Runoff also wasn't an issue, so that was resolved.
Okay.
No detention. And then finally, the question on the smell, we actually were standing next to it in a rainstorm, and we couldn't smell anything. So,
It loses its smell after a couple days.
so we thought, at least I thought, sir, that we had all of the issues resolved so that you could operate the business if we passed this ordinance. Now, it's a little surprising to hear you say we've limited you somehow.
One more page. Thank you. So the exhibit before you this evening is actually what is being proposed to be attached to the ordinance. Now, this is also the Plan Commission's recommendation that we have made into this exhibit. So as you can see, Attorney Anderson, Engineer Wallers, and I did visit the site. We did discuss utilizing the southern portion because it was paved. Upon further review, it was paved.
Southern portion
The blue.
being the blue or the red area in the front as well?
We did discuss this area. However, when the Plan Commission talked about it, they were also concerned about the residents. And so therefore, not only did they want to contain the outdoor storage to the paved area, the existing paved area, they also wanted to make sure, take the residents into account. And that's why it ended up being the southwest, more or less, corner of the property.
Where are they being asked to put a fence?
Well, they have a number of options. Option one was to fence in only the area. Now, in discussions with the petitioner,
The blue area.
yes, correct, thank you, the blue area. Now, in discussions with the petitioner, it came up that this really doesn't work. They'd have to go through two fences, two gates,
Sure.
which we understood. So therefore, then after we discussed fencing, basically, the existing chain link fence would be replaced with a board-on-board fence to meet the ordinance. Now, that existing chain link stretches in this area and then also off the back of this building and follows. And it does actually go around the site, but we're really worried about the areas that residential would be able to see. So we've only required them to place that fence along these two areas as well as the front.
And she indicated that the fencing was not really the big issue tonight. It was more the paved area, the storage only on the paved area, correct?
Jared, is the area in front of the blue line where the fence is going to go? Right there, that area there, is that paved?
It is.
So we're requesting them to not use that in consideration for the residents, but by doing so, we're limiting probably 25% maybe of,
You would be eliminating some area. It was envisioned at the time that trucks would be parked there, et cetera. However, once again, that is something that the board can amend.
But again, just factually, when we went there, and I think it's the same tonight, is the area in blue is where you're operating.
There was the pile of wood chips and there was lots on the other side, which we moved all that already.
Yeah.
We moved it already because
I remember you said you were going to move it so that it would all be on the paved area, but we drove around that area with my car. There was no problem with sizing in that blue area for your operation. Again, unless your operation has expanded substantially, there wasn't a problem there.
when we went there, sorry, I'm a little nervous right now. When we went there, we have the piles of logs on the other side, that was on the north side, and we have the wood chips on this side. Now, by us moving the logs to this side, we've done. And Jerry went there with me, so how the area summed to a little piece, because we moved all the wood, logs for the firewood to this south side area.
How many cubic yards of wood chips and cubic yards of mulch do you think you have right now? Just ballpark.
Maybe 800,
Cubic yards?
I would say.
Are they under 10 feet?
Oh, yeah.
There's no way the public can hear what this person is saying when they watch our video or listen to our recordings? I think this is important enough that they need to hear the complete conversation, yes.
And I guess that's one of my concerns, because if we're limiting the height, we're not limiting the size of the pile. So technically, I guess he could do that whole blue area in a 10-foot depth of mulch, and it doesn't matter. I mean, you could have it 30 feet high and 30 feet wide. It's going to be less than the cubic yardage of that blue area. So did Plan Commission, Jared, did Plan Commission limit the total cubic yardage that they could do?
No, the limitation was by height, which is in the ordinance set at 10 feet. We did not alter, recommend any alterations to that. And then this was the maximum size that was discussed.
I guess my next question is, a majority of the cubic yardage that you have, is it wood chips or is it mulch?
Right now, wood chips.
Okay.
Right now, but what about later?
Sir, do you have anything else that you'd like to kind of add in before we deliberate and move forward?
What I'm trying to explain is the cubic yards right now, if you guys want 10 foot, yes, we okay with that, but we got to spread it out. You know, my minimize 10 foot, it will be not enough. It's what happened with the property in Rathbone. The pile is so big because they only have 1.5 acres. So it's why they had to make the pile up. That was the only reason.
Okay, if I can
But are
attempt at moving this along, the option that I would prefer this evening, unless the petitioner or the user feels otherwise, would be to approve the special use. We had 2 Plan Commission meetings on this and now 2 at the board level. My understanding is at the last Plan Commission meeting and then at the Committee of the Whole meeting last week, there was a general consensus of what we were doing here. So unless there's any objection, I would like us to vote on the special use this evening so that JPC can do business in Montgomery and without violating our ordinances. And then if the owner or the user would like to come back through the process, because this is more of a Plan Commission discussion, I would feel uncomfortable changing things now when the Plan Commission did talk about this twice. So if you wanted to, if the board is comfortable with that process, I think we have a good solution here that the residents and the Plan Commission and the board last week kind of agreed with. If there's any discussion on that, or I would entertain a motion to approve the special use as written.
I think the problem was the discussion is the petitioner changed with the planning commission a couple of times and then with us. I mean, no mulch, now he wants mulch again. I think it goes to the entire area. It was never brought up, like Steve said, it was 10 feet high. Now he's going, spreading it out. Well, it doesn't make a difference, like the one on Rathbone, they had to put it up on top, but it all goes down to the same thing. In the beginning, the petitioner said he was gonna bring it in, deliver it to his customers, and bring new in. Now, and that's where your smell comes, is it sits. And if he comes in and keeps spreading it out and only taking it from one side, the other side's gonna smell bad. And I think the planning commission never really, they thought 10 foot high, but like he said, now he wants 10 and he wants to spread it. Well, I think we'd be better off if we put a limit on how many cubic yards that he can keep in there, and that way he has to do, like he said originally, he's got to get it in and take it to customers, instead of keep piling it in there, and it, you know, it just doesn't, that Rathbone is a mess, because it was way high, but it was so spread out, it didn't make a difference. The stuff on the bottom rotted and smelled, and that's the same way this is gonna be, if he spreads it out so much and only goes in from one side and picks it up. And I think what the planning commission said is if it's only 10 feet high in a small area, we don't have to worry about the smell, which is the truth. So I think a lot of it is if we have some kind of limitation, I have no problem if we say a third of that should be just mulch and, you know, this many cubic, and you've got to keep moving it.
I know we keep maybe 40 yards of mulch on hand at any one time. And then that dwindles down, and then we get more.
Could I clarify a question in my mind? There's been some discussion about a larger area of that property being paved than is reflected in what I perceive the plan to be. would that alter the recommendation of the Plan Commission, the fact that more of it is really paved? Or,
I think at the last plan commission, they understood
Yeah,
what
they were
was
aware
paved.
of that.
We clarified that between the two plan commissions.
if I look at the photograph, and I drove by this property tonight as well, the portion that presumably is paved looked like dirt to me, so what really is going on there?
It does look that way. That's why the original thought was that it wasn't paved, because it's been used for so many years to store gravel and things like that. There's actually a surface layer of gravel, but when you kick it with your shoe, it readily becomes apparent it's paved.
Okay, that's helpful.
I
Thank you.
think the planning commission didn't care about the concrete, because they understood that finally, and at the same time, the fence, I think we could work out something better than a $15,000, $20,000 fence, even if you put it in the front of the property, that, something. I think the big problem is the mulch and how much of it is. If you're only using 40 and you're one of the bigger users, what's he gonna do with it? I guess that's my question. There's too many ifs on that. If you cut it down to so much, and then at the same time, somebody's gonna have to keep watching the size, and that's a problem, because if he's in violation, he's got the special use. What do you do then?
I will give them the special use if we limit the cubic yardage.
I would too. I don't see any problem with the whole property, but I have a problem when he coming back with different size mulch piles, and that was the biggest problem. The committee of the whole, there wasn't gonna be any mulch, and now all of a sudden he comes back again, now he wants a lot of mulch, more than he's ever wanted. Now I start to worry.
How would you guys feel about, unless anybody has anything else to add, actually act on the item at hand, whether we vote it up, vote it down, move forward, and either they can move forward with their special use tomorrow, they'll have their special use, or then we can go back to the drawing board and at next month's plan commission, start the process over again.
Is what's on the table tonight exclude mulch or include mulch?
It includes mulch. It is not specific to the type of materials. The limits are, basically, the blue area is where they could store outdoor storage.
What's the time frame for the fencing?
And also, they have passed the deadline for June Plan Commission, so tabling this would kick this item to July.
There's a question.
Yes.
What's the timeline for the fencing to be installed?
The timeline is somewhat flexible. I mean, as staff, we would work with them to work on the fencing and make sure that it's something that we feel is acceptable. Is there a deadline in the ordinance? There's not a set timeline in the ordinance as proposed.
When we drafted the ordinance, our thought was to try to be business-friendly, to give them a manageable time frame to put it in and not demand it immediately.
And what's the ramifications to us if we grant this and 6 months from now the fence isn't installed?
Well, assuming 6 months is the deadline, then it would be a revocation of the special use, and they'd have to stop their operations.
Okay, but if we vote on this and there is no timeline?
No, there is a timeline, it's just staff-driven. What we did was we built flexibility in there to give the staff an opportunity to meet with the petitioner, whoever that is now, and determine what's a viable time frame for them. In other words, not say it's 6 months even if it's a $50,000 fence. It's probably not realistic. So try to develop a reasonable time frame.
And I don't think there's any problem with the wood chips. The neighbors didn't care about that because there's no smell, and I would like to see somebody, probably Steve, to make a motion to pass the special use, but put a limit, which I think that if you went back to the planning commission, they'd think about that too, and put a limit on how much of the area can be put in mulch.
I think we've all, at the risk of getting all diving back into this, we're already limiting the square footage, the area that they can consume, and I believe it's maxed, at least that's how it usually is for these things, maxed out at 10 or 14 feet, however it's written. So we're essentially requiring a certain cubic feet, we just don't have it written down that way.
I would also caution that we don't have a great way of enforcing cubic footage on the property.
So can I entertain a motion, or would anybody make a motion that we approve this special use this evening?
If I make a motion and say I give them 100 yards of mulch and 200 yards of wood chips,
How are you going to police that? How would you plan to police that?
cubic yardage is volume.
True. Are you going to send a survey crew out there?
The enforcement becomes an issue.
We have a
How do you
definite
enforce
height
it?
and a plan area. Let's vote on
And
this this
then we
evening.
give them the special use, we send it back to plan, let them hash it out, and bring it back to us.
So you
Well, if you give them the special use, if you pass it, it's passed.
And then
So
it doesn't have to go to plan.
doesn't need to go back unless the petitioner wants to bring it back, but I don't think her plan is to bring it back to reduce it. I think the plan is to expand it, so.
Could I move to table until we've really got our arms around this?
I would just, again, caution then what you would want us to do with it.
Well,
The petitioner would be out of compliance
Until after July, because they missed the deadline.
if it was sent back to Plan Commission.
But he made a motion. If-
But yes, July, it would be at a minimum July.
No, I didn't make a motion, I said if.
No,
Oh,
Is
okay.
there a motion, or is there a second for the motion? Then that dies. So I'll entertain a motion to approve this evening and vote however you like on the issue. If you feel like there's not enough information, actually, this is the recommendation, so we'll have 2 votes. If you feel like we need to discuss this, or Plan Commission needs to discuss it further, we could, feel free to vote however you like on the issue. But note that if you fail this special use, that company's operating in violation of our ordinances tomorrow, continuing. And it'll be before July, before we can address the issue again through Plan Commission. What's troubling is that this is our 4th public meeting on the issue, and the ball keeps moving, our target keeps moving on this. So we have a company that has complied with everything that we've asked of them up until this evening. So I'd like to act on the item tonight. If you know you don't want this special use and you're not going to vote for it, then make that known today. But if you agree with the thing and we need to tweak some things or at their direction, then we can do that while they have a special use.
If I could recommend jumping then immediately to C, there's no real reason to act on the recommendation. C is the issue, which is ordinance 1565.
Okay. So is there a motion on ordinance 1565?
Motion,
Motion by trustee Marisak,
second?
second by trustee Bond. Take the roll, please.
Trustee Marisak.
yes.
Trustee Bond.
No.
Trustee Spurling.
Yes.
Trustee Lee.
Yes.
Trustee Heinz.
No.
Trustee Youngerman.
Yes.
And the motion carries. Do we have to do anything official with the Plan Commission recommendation?
No.
Okay. All right. I appreciate you guys coming this evening, and feel free to contact staff and go through the special use process if you feel it's necessary.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, moving along, item D this evening, the recommendation of Plan Commission on a text amendment regarding residential development marketing signs, and I'll ask Judy for her update on this issue.
Sure. D is the recommendation, and E is actually the ordinance that amends the text signage. This was a unanimous recommendation from the Plan Commission, and it would amend the signage ordinance for residential off-premise and on-premise signage, increasing the maximum size allowed for both of those. So, if there are any questions on this item, I'd be happy to answer them.
Are there any questions this evening?
Just to clarify, in my mind, would this change the ordinance for everyone or just this petitioner?
Everybody.
Okay.
And this is for really just housing signs, that type of advertising?
Correct. Residential development signage.
If there's no more questions, entertain a motion on item D, which is the Plan Commission recommendation.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Take the roll, please.
Trustee Youngerman.
Yes.
Trustee Marisak.
Yes.
Trustee Bond.
Yes?
Trustee Spurling.
Yes.
Trustee Lee.
Yes.
Trustee Heinz.
No.
All right, motion carries 5-1. And then we'll move right on to item E, which is the ordinance 1566. If there isn't any further discussion, entertain a motion on that.
So moved.
Moved by Youngerman.
Second.
Second by trustee Lee.
No.
Take the roll, please.
Trustee Youngerman.
Yes.
Trustee Marisak.
Yes.
Trustee Bond.
Yes?
Trustee Spurling.
Yes.
Trustee Lee.
Yes.
Trustee Heinz.
No.
And that carries 5-1 as well. Move on to item F this evening, ordinance 1564, which is the update of our fire prevention code. Like these other ones, I know you guys discussed this last week in detail, so I will turn this over to Jamie for a report on that, if she has anything to add.
Sure, if there are any additional questions, we'd be happy to answer them at this time.
Any other questions on this? I'll entertain a motion to approve ordinance 1564.
So moved.
Moved by trustee Bond,
Second.
second by trustee
Spurling.
Spurling. I say Teresa. Take the roll, please.
Trustee Bond.
Yes.
Trustee Spurling.
Yes.
Trustee Lee.
Yes.
Trustee Heinz.
Yes.
Trustee Youngerman.
Yes.
Trustee Marisak.
Yes.
And that carries 6-0. Move on to item G, which is the setting of the Boulder Hill Water Main Improvement Fee, and I will ask our acting administrator, Jeff Zolfel, to summarize.
Thank you. Later in the meeting, you're going to be asked to the awarding. All right, that better? You'll be asked to approve the awarding, the issuance of bonds for the Boulder Hill project, and you're also going to be asked to award the bids for the construction of the project. Before we do those, we need to have a way of repaying that. And so what I'm asking you to do is set a fee that would be not to exceed $15 per month. I would begin with, it says here the June bills, it'd actually be the bills that go out August 1st and would run for a period of 25 years or until the debt is paid off. And so that is what we're asking this evening, and I would entertain any questions you may have.
And just to summarize, the fee, I know it's in the ordinance, is
4 million.
We would say it would not exceed $15 per month.
not exceed $15 a month for Boulder Hill residents only,
Correct.
or Boulder Hill water customers. Are there any additional comments or questions for staff on this item? I entertain a motion to approve the improvement fee for Boulder Hill Water.
So move.
Moved by trustee Heinz,
Second.
second by trustee Youngerman. Take the roll, please.
Trustee Heinz.
Yay.
Trustee Youngerman.
Yes.
Trustee Marisak.
Yes.
Trustee Bond.
Yes.
Trustee Spurling.
Yes.
Trustee Lee.
Yes.
And that carries unanimously. Item H, the grant of easements for the same project. And I'll turn this over to Director Poobens for a summary on that.
Thank you, President Brawley. In your packet tonight is a group of easements that the village has obtained from various residents on near Barclay Court and Fieldcrest Drive. These easements are part of the Boulder Hill Water Main Improvement, and it will allow us to do a rear yard installation of water main between Barclay Court and Fieldcrest Drive. So we met with the residents some time ago, obtained their signatures on the easements. We wanted to wait until we were a little further along in the process before accepting the easements and recording them. So what we're asking tonight is for the board to approve the granting or the acceptance of easements as listed in your packet. Be happy to take any questions.
Hearing no questions, I'll entertain a motion to approve the grant of easement.
So move.
Moved by
Second.
trustee Heinz, second by trustee Lee. Take the roll, please.
Trustee Heinz.
Yes.
Trustee Youngerman.
Yes.
Trustee Marisak.
Yes.
Trustee Bond.
Yes.
Trustee Spurling.
Yes.
Trustee Lee.
Yes.
And that's unanimous. I, ordinance 1568. It's approving the issuance of the bonds for the same project, and I will ask Jeff for any summary he has.
Thank you. Bids were received today on the project. I passed out two things at tonight's meeting. One is an updated ordinance with the information from the bids today, and the other one is just a summary from Spear about the bids. They did actually receive two bids. The low bid was 3.7% interest for the 25-year period, and so that is what we are recommending, is obviously going with the lowest interest rate. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have about it. Kevin McCann from Spear Financial is here this evening also, if you would have any questions of him.
Are there any questions for staff or Kevin? All right, hearing none. Anyone care to make a motion to approve ordinance 1568?
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Take the roll, please.
Trustee Youngerman.
Yes.
Trustee Marisak.
Yes.
Trustee Bond.
Yes.
Trustee Spurling.
Yes.
Trustee Lee.
Yes.
Trustee Heinz.
Yes.
And that's approved 6-0. Item J, award a contract to Superior Excavating and Conley Excavating for the Boulder Hill Water Main Project. And I will ask Director Poobens for a summary on this.
Thank you, President Brawley. In your packet tonight is the recommendation to award the contract for Contract A, which is the southwest portion of the Boulder Hill Water Main Project. This is predominantly all new water main installation. As you'll remember, we have 3 contracts total, A, B, and C. B and C will come to you later this year. So tonight, we're asking you to approve Contract A. It is with to Superior Excavating, Conley Excavating joint venture in the amount of $2,815,904.20. It's significantly under our engineer's estimate. We had anticipated that the bidding climate would yield good results, and it did. If you look in your packet, there's a summary, bid tabulation sheet, and you'll see that all of them were under that original estimate and grouped together fairly tightly, which is always a good sign that you feel the bid accuracy is high. So this is it. This is the big step to approve this contract to get started on the $8 million Boulder Hill water main replacement program. This is a project that this community has been talking about for decades, literally, and this board and Trustee Keck from our previous board had worked long and hard. Staff has worked long and hard. We've had great cooperation from the residents and understanding, even though there is, of course, there's a cost associated with it, great understanding and cooperation from the residents of Boulder Hill who are going to be affected by this. So tonight's tonight, and I'd ask for your approval of Contract A as stated in your packet. Be happy to answer any questions.
Could I get clarification on the award amount? Is there wording in there that not to exceed that amount, or is there room in there if they come across something that's unexpected where it can go over that amount?
That's the bid amount for the contract as it was let, so we've identified quantities of different types of work, and they've given us their price to do that. So that would be a not to exceed, assuming everything can be built according to the plan and specifications. There may be occasions where there are unforeseen issues with the construction of the project where we need to do a change order. Change orders can sometimes increase the price of the overall contract or decrease it if we find out that there's work that we anticipated that doesn't need to be done. But generally, this is a set price, again, providing everything is built according to plan. Oftentimes changes a little bit, but
Are there any allowances within that bid?
how do you mean? I'm not following you.
You have an allowance of $100,000 for, say, for silt fence, we'll say. And is there, if there are allowances, or is there any chance to maybe recoup some of those costs if those allowances aren't fully used?
I think there are. They're not in the level of $100,000 in
Just for example
silt
purposes.
fence, but we try to closely, anticipate closely what the actual construction needs are going to be. Pete, any comments on that? I might have something.
Generally, we don't try to inflate any of the quantities because we don't want to mislead the bidders to provide a lower unit price because they might think they're providing more unit than they are. So the units that are on the plans reflect what we believe are the correct quantities for the plans. There are some items in there because of the unknown nature of underground excavation that we do have. For example, we have a line item in there for furnishing foundation material when you have areas where you have unstable foundation. We don't know if there's any areas that have unstable foundation, but we have allowed for some of that. So as Mike said, there are some items in there to anticipate unknown conditions or unforeseen conditions, but not to the level that you're talking about. When we put together the budget for the bond, we did allow for a construction contingency fund in the bond amount. So we would use that money to, to answer any of the unforeseen things that come up.
Okay, thank you.
Is there a timeline, part of the bid, or a timeline for completion?
We'd anticipate construction will begin in June of this year and be significantly complete by the fall of this year. There may be some landscaping issues that need to be carried over into the next year. That certainly wouldn't mean gaping holes in the right-of-way, but turf establishment, tree planting, that type of thing.
Are there any other questions on item J? Hearing none, Entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
So moved by trustee Spurling,
Second.
second by trustee Lee. Take the roll, please.
Trustee Spurling.
Yes.
Trustee Lee.
Yes.
Trustee Heinz.
Yes.
Trustee Youngerman.
Yes.
Trustee Marisak.
Yes.
Trustee Bond.
Yes.
And that, approve that 6-0. Item K, the agreement for professional services with Natural Path Urban Forestry Consultant of Oak Park for a village-wide tree survey in the amount of $22,000. Again, I'll turn this over to Director Poobens for a summary.
Thank you, President Brawley. In your packet tonight is the agreement, or the proposed agreement with Natural Path Urban Forestry Consultants to perform a tree survey for the Village of Montgomery. This will include over 8,000 trees on 150 miles of village street. Part of the program will include data collection using GPS locating methods, so they will go on site and locate using GPS devices each tree in the public right-of-way. No private trees will be considered in this study. They will do a tree risk summary that can be for both existing disease or structural issues that need to be rectified. So you may find that there's some trees that need to be pruned or removed as a result of this. They'll help us with an emerald ash borer management plan. One of the primary benefits of this will be to get a better handle on the extent of the emerald ash borer problem in Montgomery. We know it's significant just from field reconnaissance that we've been able to do, but again, we'll be able to be more accurate and precise with our understanding of it. Passage of this request tonight will help us in our long-term management programs. Quite honestly, this is really forming the foundation of our future urban forestry management. It'll help us establish pruning programs. It'll help us with species diversity. It'll help us with risk management programs, all these things I mentioned in the cover letter. But again, I feel it's a critical part of a long-term management plan. This proposal is to hire a consultant to come in and do the work. I think in the future, we could certainly consider doing updates with our own staff or possibly interns from forestry programs in the area. I think that would be a very cost-effective way to update it. For the initial development of the survey, though, I highly recommend going with a consultant. They're very familiar in developing these types of programs. They have the equipment, they have the trained staff to do it. We would have a difficult time providing that level of program if we were to do it ourselves. Be happy to answer any other questions.
What do you think the time frame is to complete the entire survey?
About 6 weeks. We haven't talked to them really about a start date yet. We're trying to see how it would go here. So if it were to pass tonight, we'll call Mark Dunneman, he's the president of the company, and try to get that established. But certainly this summer, we'll be able to certainly anticipate that we'll be able to use the information that we gather from this as we prepare for our budget talks, which will start for staff in October, which isn't too far away. So.
Does this cost include just the survey, but also the software?
The quote is in the back. Let me take a quick look. Location information, tree information, hardscape information. Data will be provided in an Esri GIS tree layer. Esri is a company. I'm not a GIS expert. I would have to
We
refer to
do,
others.
the village does maintain licenses for that software.
Yeah, it's pretty much, I believe, the standard of the industry. So they would provide that tree layer that would fit into our GIS program. And again, as many of you know, a GIS program is based just in a large database that you can connect to parcels or objects. So each tree in this database would have each tree in the survey would have a database behind it of location, species, size, health, et cetera, et cetera. And that database can be grown and added to over the years as we choose, as we feel we need to collect further information. Thank you.
And I appreciate staff actually having the vision to think about our long-term planning for the trees. We were sitting up there at the comprehensive plan meeting, and Jamie mentioned the large population of trees that we have on the west side that will mature in the next 5 to 10 years, that we're going to have to formulate a plan on how to treat them and all that. So
Best $20 I ever spent, President Brawley, to get her to say that.
thank you.
My question,
Yes,
you're using a quarter of your budget in grounds repair and service for this survey.
yes, sir.
And I didn't mind it if we were gonna get a grant, but, you know, I didn't really care if we had 660 ash trees that are gonna fall down, and, or whether Ed went around and said we got about 600. It, to me, being more specific in some things
Right.
isn't necessarily a big deal.
And we had applied for a grant, for some background, we had applied for a grant through the Metropolitan Mayor's Caucus. They have come out with several grant programs. They're pretty decent grant programs. You can imagine the need for that money far outweighs the availability of that money. So we were unsuccessful in getting it, and after we learned that news, Ed Paff and I, our village arborist, reviewed our budget, and we felt that we could cut back in some other areas, still meet the absolute needs, so any hazardous trees that have to come down will come down. Any tree pruning that has to be done will be done. Stumps will be removed, new trees will be planted still. But we did scale back from our budget proposals. And for me, trustee, the need for the precision comes in. We can say, just anecdotally, well, there's about 600 trees, and maybe there's 700, maybe there's 800. I can tell you that the gap between the number of trees that are dying in each year and the number of trees that we can replace that gap is getting larger. It's not to the point quite yet where I think where you drive down the streets of Montgomery and it's, you know, highly noticeable, but in another year or two, it will be. And I think that's when the residents of this community will start to take much more notice of it, especially when it starts to affect them. So again, I think this is a tool that we start now by trying to identify how big that gap is going to be and figuring out some way we can address it. Also, the other thing, you know, if a few more trees are dead for EAB, they get struck by lightning, in this grand scheme of the world, probably doesn't matter a lot unless the limb from that dead tree falls on your car. So we really look at this as a hazard mitigation tool. I feel it's important that we know where those dead trees are, because at some point, and I would refer to Attorney Anderson to give you the legal view on municipal liability for such things, but at some point, we need to take care of those. And quite honestly, we've struggled in the past few years with keeping up with some of that. Our older neighborhoods on the east side, that's where we're going to be spending the majority of our large tree pruning and tree removal monies this year. So,
Just as long as you keep up with the GPS in future years and not use this as a one-time deal, and as long as you know that you're taking money out of this fund, it's nice to know what trees to be pruned, but if you don't have any money to prune them or no manpower, I mean, it's nice to.
I'm going to talk to you about November of this year on that, manpower and money. But you're right, on both counts. We do need to keep it updated. So Ed and I have already talked about that. Again, that's something we'd hope to do with staff or with interns or seasonal help or something. You know, we'll certainly work with Engineer Wallers and his staff on the GPS technology. Again, we'll get 8,000 plus trees knocked out this time. Unlikely that we're going to add thousands of trees each year. You know, our current budget's going to allow us to plant probably no more than 150 trees this year. So again, we'd have to make sure they get in the database and are started, but I agree with you on both counts. It's not the end all. Yes, trustee?
I was talking to an arborist. There's a thing you can treat them trees. They'll last up to 5 years. That would slow the process down. It's cheaper to treat them trees, and the ones that are dead now you can get down, but they'll last a little longer, 5 years.
We've looked at that. There are some pesticides that will limit the spread of ash borer in the tree. We've worked with some residents. Actually, your HOA is using that method to try to preserve the trees in the Lakeside subdivision. Our feeling, again, with limited resources, is those trees, once you stop treating them, that's likely they're going to die. Our view is it's much cheaper, and we're able to remove them when they're smaller than if we wait 5 or 6 years and now we have larger trees that still need to be removed, and they're still the village's responsibility. That's an option. I know some communities, some of the larger communities for sure have very aggressive pesticide treatments. Again, again, our budget's fairly limited, so, again, in working with that path for arborists, we feel our best approach is to remove the trees, especially areas west of Orchard Road where most of the trees are still 5, 6, 7 years old and can be managed by our own staff.
Now, Trustee Lee mentioned that, so when you plant a new tree, there'll be a procedure in place that it'll automatically be loaded so that we don't have to incur expense to go back out and map it?
We
So
may
that
have,
the
we
data-
may have to incur an expense. That could be an expense that we pay out to somebody who has the GPS capabilities to get the coordinates. It may be an expense in our own staff time, which we're paying for, right? We're just not writing a check for it when we send them out. Now, the easiest situation will be is if we cut down a tree and plant a new tree right there, we've already got a database line for
Update the
that.
database.
And somewhere in there will be a column for tree replace date. And that's all we do. We enter the tree replace date, and now we're tracking that tree. If it were a tree, and I don't know, maybe it was a large lot or had multiple frontages, and we moved the tree, then we would go out with the GPS unit, most likely, and locate it. Again, I say that, I'm not a GPS expert, so there may be simpler methods or way to just calculate those coordinates and enter them. And again, we're not requiring sub-meter accuracies. I will probably get sub-meter, but I mean, we don't need to be within a centimeter of that tree. It's really an address location, so.
Are there any other questions for Director Poobens on this? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve item K.
So moved.
Moved by trustee Marisak, second by trustee Youngerman. Will you take the roll, please?
Trustee Marisak?
Yes.
Trustee Bond?
Yes.
Trustee Spurling?
Yes.
Trustee Lee?
Yes.
Trustee Heinz?
Yes.
Trustee Youngerman?
Yes.
And that carries 6-0.
Thank you.
We'll move on to item L this evening, which is Resolution 2013-10, which is the street maintenance program and salt purchase. And I will turn it right back over to Director Poobens for a summary.
Thank you, President Brawley. In your packet tonight is, we're asking for approval of Resolution 2013-010. Basically, this is the IDOT resolution that they require that the municipality pass. It basically shows that the legislative body is approving use of the MFT funds that they collect and the accounts they maintain for us. So there's actually 3 documents that you'll be approving with this vote. The first is the resolution for maintenance of streets and highways. Again, that is the resolution saying that we agree that we want to spend our money. The second is the maintenance engineering to be performed by a consulting engineer. That is approval that we are going to spend money, and we will hire EEI to do both the preliminary engineering, which is the design, and then the construction engineering, which is the field inspection and layout work. The third agreement is municipal estimate of maintenance costs, which is basically where we're showing the Department of Transportation, here's how we're justifying the dollars that we're asking to use from our account. So that money is collected through the state as part of your gasoline price. Most people know that. They maintain it, it's our money, but these are the steps we need to go through to indicate again that the legislative body approves the expenditure. So for us this year, it will be approximately $500,000, $500,000. That'll be to do resurfacing work on Riverbend Drive, Hamlet Circle, Lebanon Street, and then various patching locations throughout the community. It does include $160,000 for the snow removal. That mainly pays for all our road salt that we use. Again, we don't always use that 160, and whatever we don't use stays in our MFT account, but we have to pass the resolution authorizing us to spend that much should we need it. So, and then the engineering services, our current estimate is just under $39,000. So again, that would be what we would hire engineering enterprises to do on our behalf.
I think it kind of goes without saying, but is worth noting that all 3 of these different items are approved uses of the MFT money, that we've been doing that for years, and it's an allowable use for that money.
That's absolutely correct, yes.
Are there any comments for Director Poobens on this issue? Hearing none, entertain a motion to approve item L this evening.
So move.
Moved by trustee Heinz. Second. Second by trustee Marisak. Take the roll, please.
Trustee Heinz?
Yay.
Trustee Youngerman?
Yes.
Trustee Marisak?
Yes.
Trustee Bond?
Yes.
Trustee Spurling?
Yes.
Trustee Lee?
Yes.
And that carries 6-0. Moving on to item M this evening, the award of contract to Strata Construction, the amount of $25,100 for our 2013 sidewalk replacement program. And I'll ask Director Poobins to summarize this.
Thank you, President Brawley. In your pack tonight is a recommendation to award a contract to Strata Construction they are Addison, Illinois, to do our sidewalk replacement program. Each year, our street supervisor, Gary Byer, walks parts of the community, does a sidewalk survey. His main focus is to eliminate tripping hazards. So that could be elevated concrete slabs, it could be cracked and small pavement, it could be tree roots intruding into the sidewalk. So we're recommending tonight that we award the contract to Strata. They'll come in. This is really spot removal and replacement throughout various locations in the community. It doesn't really, it does include some curb and gutter replacement. I think Gary's estimated 50 to 100 feet. So again, we'll have small sections of curbing that are broke or sunken that he'll replace. Also, Strata did this work for us last year, did an excellent job. Actually, they were in and out in about a week or so. They really got to it. So I think they're a quality firm and would recommend that you approve the award.
There's an address on Kate Avenue that has 2 missing sections. Do you know if that's going to be replaced? Right now, there's a cone.
A Village of Montgomery cone?
I believe so.
I would have to check, trustee.
Would that be a
Discussions on that
developer thing?
subdivision have been ongoing in regards to who's building and who's finishing infrastructure. So our focus was not in that subdivision. Now, that particular point may have been brought to our attention and Gary may have marked it, so I would have to check.
Okay. Thank you.
I can follow up on that and let you know if
Please.
it is on our list.
Trustee Marisak, did you have something, a question? I will note on this, 25,000 is more like Band-Aids, and we don't actually have a program to, for new sidewalk construction. There's plenty of areas on the central downtown where I used to live down there, and then on the east side of town that have no sidewalks. And there currently, we don't have any funding, thus no program to replace those, or to construct those, so until we can highlight a funding source for that, that isn't going to be a reality. So if there's any other comments, make them at this time, otherwise I'll entertain a motion to approve item M.
So moved?
Moved by trustee Bond,
Second.
second by trustee Youngerman. Take the roll, please.
Trustee Bond?
Yes?
Trustee Spurling?
Yes.
Trustee Lee?
Yes.
Trustee Heinz?
Yes.
Trustee Youngerman?
Yes.
Trustee Marisak?
Yes.
And that carries 6-0. I feel like we keep moving down to the next item, but we're not going very far. Item N this evening, the award of contract to Meyer Paving in the amount of $37,000 and change for our 2013 street patching program. And again, turn it right back over to Director of Public Works, Mike Poopins.
Thank you, President Brawley. I'm working on brevity. Administrator Zolfo says I need to work harder, but there's a slight typo in the packet tonight. You'll see that in the recommendation letter from Engineering Enterprises, it shows Meyer Paving being located in Maple Park, Illinois. That is correct. On the bid tabulation sheet, it says Addison, Illinois. That was just a carryover as we try to reuse bid tab sheets. So they are located in Maple Park, Illinois. But tonight, the recommendation is to award this contract to Meyer Paving to perform spot street repairs. Again, this would primarily be pavement patching, the majority of which result from water main break repairs. We've also identified some other locations that just need patching because they're deteriorating. So again, we'll concentrate up in Boulder Hill subdivision. We like to work with Mr. Grosskopf, the highway commissioner there, as they seem to suffer the most inconvenience with our water main breaks. So, but again, it's pretty straightforward. It's in the amount of $37,357.20. Answer any questions?
Could we negotiate the 20 cents?
If you round up, they'll always say yes, right? That one I'll get for you, trustee. It's going to take a lot of work, but I'm going to get it.
Any other comments for Director Poopins on this item? Is there a motion to award the contract to Meyer Paving?
So moved.
Moved by
Second.
Moved and seconded. Take the roll, please.
Trustee Youngerman.
Yes.
Trustee Marisak.
Yes.
Trustee Bond.
Yes.
Trustee Spurling.
Yes.
Trustee Lee.
Yes.
Trustee Heinz.
Yes.
And that carries 6-0. Item O this evening, award a contract to JPC Tree Care for our tree planting program this year, which is not to exceed $20,250. And I'll turn it back over to Director Poobens for a summary.
Thank you, President Brawley. In your packet tonight is a recommendation to award a contract to JPC Tree Care of Montgomery for Village Parkway tree planting, as said, not to exceed $20,250. The $20,250 is slightly, somewhat of it's an even number, but it looks odd. That's 150 trees at the bid price of $135 per tree. So that's how we came up with that not to exceed. I won't go through it now, but the bid specifications are included in your packet. And when we sent this out for bids, we said our goal is to plant between 100 and 150 trees. So taking the maximum, that would set the limit at that amount. Bids were put out in, I apologize, it says not applicable. We did put out bids. They closed on May 15th. We did just receive one bid. JPC Tree is the company who was part of the special use permit earlier. I can assure you the two actions are quite separate. We put this contract out for bid, and it was open to any bidder that qualified. JPC was the lone respondent. Seeing as how they will now be operating in compliance with our special use, we feel it's appropriate that they are qualified to do the work, and now that their business is appropriately set up, we would recommend awarding this contract to them. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Can you tell when the bid packet was actually released? That was one of my questions.
Early May, I apologize, there's a typo there, it says NA. Generally, we leave these bids out for approximately 2 weeks. We shoot for 10 business days minimum, so it was roughly 2 weeks. It's put out in the local newspapers for, general review. I'm not sure, I have a hard time telling you why there was only one bidder. I'll be honest with you, I thought there would be more.
Me too.
But again, it's
Fair price?
yes.
Your knowledge of the history?
Mhm.
When these trees are planted, do they need to be watered, obviously?
Pardon me?
They need to be watered?
They do.
Is that a resident's responsibility? Does
The village will do that, will perform that function. We're always happy to have residents volunteer to do it. We will try to purchase enough, they're called gator bags, is what I've heard them called, but you've seen the watering bags that will attach to the tree that we can fill up, and all they do is drain slowly and water the tree. So if residents are willing to put a few gallons of water in those, we're more than happy to let them. That certainly helps ensure the long-term survivability of the tree. But if not, our staff will fill the bags. But we won't just plant them and let them go and cross our fingers. I'd been asked earlier in the week, I'm going to blow my brevity pledge. If the trees are warranted, we've talked to many of you probably purchased trees that have a warranty. We purchase non-warranted trees. And the reason we do that is we feel that we get the lowest price for the tree, and to buy a warranted tree, the price goes up to pay for the risk that the nursery is assuming. As you can imagine, once it's out of their hands, who knows how poorly or how well it's taken care of. So our feeling is, ours being NPAF and I, that in the long run, we're better off buying non-warranted trees. The loss rate that we have is extremely low, and certainly would not be cheaper than buying all warranted trees, so.
And this is just the cost to install the trees,
Correct,
not the actual trees themselves?
right. We purchase the trees separately. We have several local nurseries that we use. Ed will prepare a bid sheet, bid specification for trees. We do shop around a little bit depending on who has what trees, what condition they're in, and of course, what price they're in. Sometimes a certain nursery will be the only one that has a particular variety of tree. And again, working to provide some level of species diversity. We don't want to just plant 150 blaze maples. or whatever. Those are fine trees, but
150 ash.
150, yeah, we get a good price on ash trees now.
We don't ask for a bond,
We do not.
performance bond?
No, we're not out any money on this contract until the work is done. They have to complete the work before they can bill us. So there's really, the village isn't really carrying any financial risk of them not planting, I suppose, other than the price of having somebody else come in might be a little more. But quite honestly, the effort involved to collect on a bond is pretty significant, and for the value of the overall contract, we don't feel it's really worth our while to do it.
I'm assuming they'll have the correct contractor's licensing through the village and also the necessary insurance requirements?
Yes.
Okay.
Stan, do you have a comment?
This planting of new trees, how might it dovetail with the tree survey effort we just discussed? Does it make sense to tie these together?
I don't know if it works to tie them together. We identified 2 planting periods in this contract. The first ends June 30th, and we're requiring that up to half the trees be planted by then. So I would believe that those trees would probably be planted early enough to be included in the survey. The second planting period is from September 1st through, I believe, October, November. I'd have to check. Those we may have to add to the database later. I could ask it if, I'm sure Ed knows the locations by address of the trees, we may be able to work with the tree survey consultant to locate where the tree was removed from, and now again, we've created the line in the database that we can just insert the new tree data. It's a good idea.
Get my 20 cents back.
You earned it, right?
Any other comments or questions for Director Pullins on item O? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve the contract JCP tree
Motion, so moved.
by trustee Bond, second by trustee Lee. Take the roll, please.
Trustee Bond?
Yes.
Trustee Spurling? Yes. Trustee Lee?
Yep.
Trustee Heinz?
Yes.
Trustee Youngerman?
Yes.
Trustee Marisak?
Yes. And that carries 6-0. All right, the next item on the agenda is the authorization to purchase the brush chipper, $55,000 from Pella, Iowa. And I'll turn it over to Director Poobens for a summary on this.
Thank you, President Brawley. This is a request to purchase a brush chipper, $55,602 from Vermeer Corporation of Pella, Iowa. That's where their corporate office is. We'll be working through a local franchise of Vermeer Company. This is a brush chipper that we were able to test on site. They lent us a similar model for several weeks. Staff, again, particularly Ed Paff, is very satisfied that this will meet the needs that we had targeted in our budget preparation. You may notice that the award price is quite a bit less than the budget price. When we developed the budget, we felt that we were going to be required to purchase a machine with what's called a Tier 4 engine, meaning Tier 4 emissions controls. Periodically, the emissions requirements increase on these types of devices. We are still legally, I might add, able to purchase and use a Tier 3 engine, so that's what we're opting for, is that we'll purchase a Tier 3. So that doesn't account for the entire 10,000, but 3,000 or 4,000 worth. So this was a budgeted item approved in the current budget. I'd be happy to answer any other questions.
Hearing no questions, entertain a motion to approve. Item P. So moved. Moved by trustee Youngerman. Second by trustee Bond. Take the roll, please.
Trustee Youngerman?
Yes.
Trustee Marisak?
Yes.
Trustee Bond?
Yes.
Trustee Spurling?
Yes.
Trustee Lee?
Yes.
Trustee Heinz?
Yes.
And that carries 6-0.
If I could add just one point, I apologize for not mentioning. We're going to purchase this through an organization called the National Joint Powers Alliance. It's an organization similar to the State of Illinois Central Management Services. It's set up through the state of Minnesota. It's open to municipal agencies of all sizes. So it's a joint purchasing program. So it's gone through the full bidding process, the full specification process. But again, you may see additional items coming from this National Joint Powers Alliance Group. So,
Under results, the date bids and closing, that's all.
that's correct. The original bid was 2009. They've awarded Vermeer 3 extensions, the most recent being in 2012. So again, it still qualifies under standard bidding procedures.
Since you win.
Thank you. No more.
Thanks for passing. All right, we'll move on to item Q this evening, intergovernmental agreement for the use of Kendall County Special Response Team van. And I will turn this over for the first time tonight. The Chief of Police, Dan Myers.
Thank you, Village President Brawley. Tonight in your packet, there is a intergovernmental agreement. Attorney Anderson has read that and approved that. In the last several months, I've been in discussions with the chiefs from Plainfield, Manuka, Oswego, and Yorkville in purchasing a special response team van. Our cost would be just approximately $7,000. We're going to split it 5 ways. We are now joining the Kendall County Special Response Team. I'll be putting an officer on there. That's the equivalent of a SWAT team. So we'll have 1 officer assigned to that. So tonight I'm asking for approval to purchase that vehicle and sign that agreement.
And the funding for that is coming from?
Our drug forfeiture account.
So are there any comments for the chief?
We're only paying 7,000,
Yes, sir?
the villages.
Yes.
And is that van being traveled to all these different communities? You're going to use it?
Correct. If the Village of Montgomery needs a call out for a special response team, they'll be responding in that vehicle.
Thank you.
But for clarification purposes, we will have like a $500 a year for maintenance, correct?
That is correct.
And that response team will come from officers from each of those communities?
That's correct.
Chief, why was the Village of Manuka not contributing as much as the other communities?
I'm not sure.
Is it the maintenance that they're not?
No, it's item number 4. Each municipality shall be responsible for 25% of the purchase contract amount, and for any equipment purchased for the SRT van except Manuka, which shall be responsible only up to a maximum amount of $7,000 for the initial purchase of the SRT van. So I'm reading that as the rest of the communities are contributing slightly more.
My understanding was that their drug forfeiture account wasn't as solid as ours or any other department. But my understanding is that 5 of us will pay $7,000.
That's what we think the initial cost of the van and the equipment will be, $7,000 from each community.
The equipment is separate, but we will be working on other arrangements to pay for that.
Thank you.
How much is in our drug forfeiture account?
I'm not 100% sure, but we're well-funded.
Good and bad. You can catch up with him after the meeting on that, when we talked about that. Are there any other comments on the IGA on this?
I like this concept, and I think it's going to benefit both our community and our neighbors.
And the vehicle's going to be stored in Oswego, correct?
Yes, sir.
Hopefully, we don't have to use it too often.
I think this is just this is one of those things that this is the world that we live in today. If we learned anything from what happened in Boston, it's that the municipalities and the police forces are going to combine their efforts, but I hope to God we never have to use it.
Is that a motion?
No? Emotional?
I make a motion, so moved.
Second.
Trustee Spurling? Take the roll, please.
Trustee Youngerman.
Yes.
Trustee Marisak.
Yes.
Trustee Bond?
Yes.
Trustee Spurling? Yes. Trustee Lee?
Yep.
Trustee Heinz?
Yay.
All right, carries 6-0.
Thank you very much.
Moving right along to R, which is ordinance 1567, which is revising the village code regarding junk, pawn shops, gold dealers. And this is a waiver of first and passage on the second reading. And I will ask
Yes, me?
No.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Chief Myers for a summary on the item.
Thank you, President Brawley. Tonight in your packet is ordinance 1567. In the past several months, my detectives have come to me and told me about issues that we've had with our current pawn shops, and I've also had discussions with Trustee Lee for well over 6 months on our current junk and pawn shop ordinance and getting that up to date. In your packet is a pretty comprehensive ordinance that was written by Steve Anderson and taken from several communities around the area. If we don't stay with what's going on in the area, what will happen is we become very popular for people who want to pawn stolen goods, and that's what's been starting to happen. So if we don't get up to speed on our pawn shop ordinance, and one or two things in there, we'll license that, and we'll also require them to get on Leads Online, which will give us access to the stolen goods pictures and names. So tonight, I'd like approval on this ordinance. If you have any questions, I'll gladly answer them.
Where is there a pawn shop in Montgomery?
There are several.
In Montgomery?
Yes, they're under the names of the gold shops. They'll take property in and give you money or exchange gold. One out on Orchard, the tool shop that's north of
By the old Ace?
Rochester. Correct?
Oh, that, I thought they just dealt in gold.
Well, that's what they imply, but that's not all.
Thank you.
I read through the whole thing, and I appreciate that our standard on this is actually more restrictive than the state standard. When I read through that you need your driver's license or 2 other forms, and one of them being a utility bill or anything that you could fabricate, really. I appreciate that our ordinance is a government-issued ID, flat out, that's it.
And that was recommendation by Village Attorney Steve Anderson.
Are there any other comments for the chief or our attorney on this?
It has there Leads On, Steve, or Village Current Electronic Reporting System. We going with Leads On?
Yes, we last year, we joined Leads Online.
That protects us if we were to go with a new company, we wouldn't have to change the ordinance.
Correct.
And this affects obviously the ones that currently are in use in the village of Montgomery?
Yeah, absolutely. We'll make our rounds and talk to them.
And this is an allowed use currently?
Yes.
In
Correct.
certain areas. Is that something that we can ask our plan commission, or that we would like to ask our plan commission to revisit, where this use is desirable or applicable?
I would like to see that, yes.
So could we add that to the, I guess, the July plan commission meeting? To,
Yes.
if you guys haven't already.
Well, what do the other board members think?
There's nobody
Okay,
opposed.
okay.
All right. With that, I'll entertain a motion to approve item R, ordinance 1567.
So move.
By
Second.
trustee Hines, second by trustee Youngerman. Take the roll, please.
Trustee Heinz?
Yes?
Trustee Youngerman?
Yes.
Trustee Marisak?
Yes.
Trustee Bond?
Yes.
Trustee Spurling?
Yes.
Trustee Lee?
Yep.
And that carries 6-0. The
Thank you.
last item for separate action, item S, is the recommendation of our TIF steering committee to accept the final eligibility report. And I'll turn it over to Assistant Village Administrator Jamie Ludwig.
Thank you. Before you tonight, item S refers to an acceptance of the report and the work that was done by the steering committee. So it was included in your packet for you to review. And very quickly, hopefully this isn't the first you're hearing of this project, but very quickly, the study kind of looked at, number one, would this general area, although nothing has been set, be eligible? And the answer is yes, it qualifies in various ways. And then the second part of the study really started to look at the development feasibility, a couple concepts for the property, as well as some phasing scenarios, how much increment might be able to be generated, would that be enough to cover some of the projects, public infrastructure projects that we know we want to do in this area. And again, the answer was yes, there would be a substantial increment that could potentially be generated. And so kind of looking at, should we move forward with the project or not? So the next step of the project, which is actually item A under items for discussion, talks about sort of how the board would like to proceed with this information, which we can talk about in a second, but I guess at this point, I don't know if you want to do these together, or if you want to vote on the recommendation to just accept the report and then talk about your next steps.
If there's any objections to the report, you guys saw, I think there was more than one report in there.
There was,
Meat and
correct.
potatoes
I
and-
had included all of the work that was done to this point
I
for
appreciate
your
that, 'cause
review.
that really gives the bulk of the work that was done. So it's all conceptual, so the theory is that this will work. So unless there's an objection, could we approve this recommendation, which just basically accepts the report, and then we'll move on and talk about next steps? Any objection to doing that?
And just one clarification, a vote of yes does not mean you're voting to approve a TIF. It's just to continue the exploration.
All right, so I'll entertain a motion on item S.
So moved.
Moved by trustee
Second.
Marisak, second by trustee Youngerman. Take the roll, please.
Trustee Marisak?
Yes.
Trustee Bond?
Yes.
Trustee Spurling?
Yes.
Trustee Lee?
Yep.
Trustee Heinz?
Yes.
Trustee Youngerman?
Yes.
That carries 6-0. And finally, we're on to items for discussion. So A, TIF.
So also at the last steering committee, the committee discussed sort of, okay, great, we have this report, it looks good, we like it, now what, kind of a concept. And a couple things sort of came up within the report. If you'll kind of see, this isn't the map I was looking for. This one. I don't know if there's any way to rotate that, but the committee's recommendation and discussion on this item was that the next step would be to authorize basically the formal plans that are required in order to establish a TIF. And so what I'd like the board to discuss tonight and consider is if they would like village staff to pursue getting some costs for them on this, and then potentially talking to some various people who might provide this service, and then we would bring it back to you again for discussion. So you're not actually, you wouldn't be approving anything other than, yes, we're still interested, we still want to look at moving forward with this. The idea from the steering committee that kind of came forward was that the area in yellow and gray is kind of this general TIF area, although boundaries would be set in the next phase. And the gray area is actually currently, perfect, thank you, not annexed to the village of Montgomery, although it was analyzed as part of the eligibility study. So as the committee had discussed, this idea that one of the ideas is that we move forward with the TIF, and by doing so, we would look at establishing one TIF district along this area. In order to do that, we would need to look at annexation of this parcel in conjunction with that. If annexation would be possible, we would look at potentially the whole area. If not, the idea that the steering committee agreed with was to proceed more with just the yellow area, thinking that some would be better than nothing when you look at the analysis and the projects of the public infrastructure. So kind of the idea for discussion before the board, of which I'd be happy to go in more detail on the report and the findings with anybody that would like that detail, but would be to kind of, if they're in agreement with this recommendation from the steering committee, and then if so, you know, if they would like us to go forward and bring them back some costs on establishing this committee. In doing so, the other thing that we would be looking at moving forward with would be trying to annex that parcel. I just lost it. This parcel here, which would mean we may potentially be approaching landowners for discussion and looking to see about doing that. So kind of the discussion point here is how our village board feels about moving forward and the whole, the steering committee's recommendation as presented.
One thing I'll lead off with, and I appreciate the summary, Jamie, is the biggest value that we get is from the, at least in my opinion, is from the Hammond property. So what the TIF consultant outlined is that we can move forward simultaneously. I don't know if you just said that, but we could move forward with basically approaching him, and I know that you've already talked with VVF, but I also like to kind of include them on the discussion. Approach them about annexing into the village, and simultaneously get quotes and move forward with the TIF project. That way, it's kind of less of an open-ended, this could go on forever. Because the TIF consultant, one thing he said to us was that our eligibility criteria could change over time. So this is a good window for us right now, and it may not always be available. And that's not saying that you should vote one way or the other, it's just saying that this option is presented to us today, and we would need to proceed.
I have a question. By voting yes, that doesn't set the boundaries of the TIF.
All we're looking for tonight is, are you okay if we go ahead and get costs on what it would be to implement it and to keep moving forward with it? That's all we're asking for you tonight.
Okay.
You're not spending anything, you're not agreeing to any things, except to let us move forward and get more information for you.
And we're also not voting for anything,
Okay.
so. So if there isn't any objections to that method, we should direct staff to approach those two parcels or those two landowners about annexing, and knowing that there is a defined time period on that, we're gonna move forward full steam with the TIF. And, the idea is that we would approve all of those, not simultaneously, but you could, in the same evening.
Okay?
Thank you.
All right, item B for discussion is the policy on political campaigning on village property. And to summarize this for the 3 new board members, this is something that the previous board had talked about. An ordinance was drafted that was not included in your packet today. It was an ordinance that was drafted by the previous board. And so this board has told me before that we like to do this kind of thing in public. So with that, I guess I could turn it over to our attorney, if you wanted to give us a brief overview of currently political campaigning on village property, any of the requirements that we have for it.
Sure. You don't have, well, let's see. To start at the beginning, political campaigning is pretty sacred ground for public forums, so there are no prohibitions against it. If you want to limit it, you can do so within reasonable parameters. So one of the policies that was brought up before the election was the concept of allow it to occur outside, but don't allow it to occur inside. That's certainly reasonable. But having said that, that's not the only possibility. You don't have to have any requirements. You could say people can campaign anywhere they want on village grounds. They can walk around the building if they feel like it. They can go to the senior luncheon, if they want to. So the parameters are yours to set, not anyone else's. And right now, I don't believe we have any specific prohibitions against it. Is that correct, Jamie?
Not on political campaigning, just on the use of the multipurpose room.
Like for rentals or something, right? Okay.
I'm sorry, is there also language for what is considered campaigning? I mean, if I'm standing out here in the audience talking to somebody and mention that I'm running for trustee, am I campaigning?
Well,
Or am I
right
having a
now-
conversation?
Right now, no, because we don't have a policy that prohibits it. But were we to create one, then we would have to define those terms. For example, Illinois law does define the terms pretty well. I mean, they've got kind of a catch-all of all political discussions, which probably is everything. But there is a definition of electioneering, and that's probably something we could tie it to if that was the desire of the board to go that direction.
I brought this up at the newly elected trustee class at the first meeting was last Wednesday with Mary McKittrick. And I asked her, I said, what are your feelings on it? And is it within the village hall? Is it village buildings? Is it on village property? And she said, she thought it was all illegal.
Yeah, she was,
which,
she was clear.
which I understand.
She thinks it's illegal to campaign on a public park?
No, she
Good
she
point.
referenced
Village
village
buildings and like the
property.
property that the
And the
village hall,
reason
police
she,
station,
the reason she gave us is that it's use of public resources.
Oh, we respectfully disagree.
Okay.
I'd advise you to follow your attorney's advice rather than another city's manager.
I'm more than happy to do that.
I would like to add, though, we do have policies regarding employee politicking and use of village equipment and village time to restrict all of our employees and anybody in the building in that capacity. So we do have those policies in place.
So is there a general consensus of whether we do or do not want to regulate this sort of thing? And if so, what are kind of the higher level items that you don't like, if it's the senior luncheon or coming to the board meeting? Try and stay away from the real specific definitions, whether or not you want to move forward with this, and then we can ask our attorney and staff to kind of hammer out some of the details and bring it back to a committee meeting in the future.
Just a question. Where's the conversation come from? I know it came from the previous board. Has there been an issue? Has there been something
There
that?
has, in the previous campaign, more than a few of the people that were running, I was one of them,
I was one of them.
had gone to the senior luncheon, and I can't speak for anybody else, but I was outside the room, meeting people, handing out business cards. And so, I don't think he minds me bringing it up, but trustee Bond had raised the question that perhaps it was something that we should or shouldn't allow. And it was something that we didn't act on, the previous board didn't act on. We were kind of moving towards that. So I emailed trustee Bond this week and felt that it was appropriate for us to have the conversation and see how this board felt on regulating campaigning in or around public property.
I don't think they should. I don't think Bill should have. I don't think you guys should have. I've never done it, but that doesn't make any difference what I haven't done, but I don't think it should be done.
And I can agree with what trustee Hines is saying. It's just, at some point, let's get our heads around it. Let's get a concise, this is right, this is wrong, and then that's it. That way it never comes up again. But I witnessed, and I have to bring this up, Stan, I did witness you at the village police station when you were running, handing out your election card. I witnessed it myself. You got to understand, I'm also a community watch coordinator.
It was a neighborhood.
I go to the meetings as well. So,
I think it,
But that's village property, we could say village functions.
I think we're
Something you
getting
guys
to
want to chew on a little bit, we can talk about.
we're getting to the same point, who's going to regulate it? I mean, any ordinance is as good as us following up on or us getting complaints on. And if it's just going to be the people running, they just make themselves all in a tizzy about it, but it's who brings it up and then who's going to say, you can't do that, you did it, that type of thing.
And
I
what's
think
the-
that's why the old
I
board
think
didn't have
it's
anything.
important to bring up the parameters and the guidelines. That way you know, hey, this is potentially crossing the line, and I don't want to do that. And it may have been brought up during this past election, and that's fine. But we'll, like I said, we'll get it figured out, and we'll move on.
My opinion on the matter is that line is a really hard line to draw in the sand, because we've had people come to our board meetings who are running for statewide or federal offices or whatnot, that have used Village Hall for various functions. We've also had people in the parades. The village president coffees are like a hotspot for candidates when it's election time. So I think that's a hard line to draw in the sand. Whether or not I would like to be approached by somebody is a different matter. Keep in mind that all these people are running for office, so they want people to appreciate. So I don't think it's something that I try and stay away from regulating that kind of stuff is particular or is in this much detail. I think that if somebody wants to come and offend all the residents in the room or hand out political stuff at the board table, I think that's going to reflect poorly on election day. So, Doug?
My thought would be, and I don't know about the verbiage of it or whatever, but you not distributing literature if you want to come to the senior luncheon and meet seniors, and so they know who you are and have a conversation with someone, that's a lot different than coming with a stack of brochures and passing them out to everybody, or sticking them on cars out in the parking lot. So I think, again, that line, you're right, there has to be some kind of a definition, but not passing out literature. Like at the candidate forum, Mary McKittrick mentioned that had the candidates had their flyers out, that's a no-no.
But I don't think they should come in a public building either and talk to anybody. If they want to talk to them out on the sidewalk. But I don't believe they should come into the building.
Again, just to clarify, I totally disagree with Mary's opinion about that.
'Cause at some point, I understand what the board's saying and the kind of the consensus that the board is having, but then you have this whole freedom of speech at some point where this is a public building, and is the sanctity just in this room? Is it, where is it? So I'm open for discussion on all of it.
And at that point, you really are, you're a resident. You're campaigning, but you're a resident, so you're part owner of the building as well.
Well, we can't control that either. One comment that might be useful is that political activism of any kind would probably fall under the same umbrella. And you'd have to say, is it all right for somebody to camp out up in the water billing counter and accost people as they come to pay their water bill? Or is it only this room or that room? But it very well could be a public petition or some other perceived grievance beyond just being a political candidate. And I don't know that we could say you have to live in Montgomery to circulate a petition here. So we probably should take a broader view of it.
Beyond just campaigning?
Is this something that you guys want to chew on? And we can bring it up again at our, at this point, don't direct staff to move forward on it, but think about how you'd feel, talk to people, and we'll talk about it at a future meeting. Okay? We'll move along real quick to the standing advisory committees. In your packet, you have the ordinance that approved the standing advisory committees, and for the new trustees, you might not know that they exist because we stopped having those meetings. So, two things, we're looking for two things this evening. One is to either go back to that, which I'm not really advocating for, or to revise that so that they don't have to have set meeting dates. Right now, we don't have development, finance. We do have intergovernmental that does meet. So is there any opinions on that? I think that, except with the exception of 2.5-hour meeting tonight, the covering that stuff at a committee of the whole meeting has been working for us, but we don't want to be in violation of our own ordinances, so. We could, I don't really want to strike the whole thing and get rid of it, because I think if stuff picked up, it's a good tool. I used to come to the board meetings and watch the board hammer out a lot of important details at committee meetings upstairs. So, my opinion would be that we just remove the requirement that they hold regular meetings and let it sit until future. Unless you guys want more meetings to go to.
No.
Hearing any objections, so.
Is there,
There's one missing, I think, too. The Board of Local Improvements is in our statutes.
BOLI does exist. It doesn't meet regularly.
No, it does not. But if we're going to do housekeeping, we may want to address that.
okay. All right.
There's also a typo on number 3. It says the village manager or her designee.
If we're updating it, we can update that. In the presence of time, I'd ask that we table the village manager and administrator ordinance this evening. I know you guys received a packet of information from staff today that gives you a good packet of information to read through. Is there any objection to tabling that and talking about that at our next committee meeting? Hearing none. Move on to Item 8, which is new or unfinished business this evening. Is there anything to come before the board?
Yes.
Trustee Marisak had a few.
I have one, I have two. One is FOIAs and the FOIA requests. I experienced this through my previous life with the school. Any FOIAs were posted on their website with the requesters, the information that was given, and the amount of time it took staff to gather the information. And I know Geneva does the same thing. I looked at one of theirs, and 25 hours of staff time to gather the information for FOIA. And I just think it might make the public a little bit more aware of the amount of time required to gather all of this information on an ongoing basis, and who's asking for it. Because that's a matter of public record, who's requesting the information. So- And I think it isn't a bad idea for the public to know how much time people are burning, especially if there's, and I don't know the history here, if there's people that do it ongoing, but I can envision that there's people that request FOIAs constantly. And at least people would be aware that, you know, John Smith requests a FOIA on every Tuesday. So I don't know what the process would be by doing that or adding that to the website.
That would increase some staff time.
We are currently tracking that. We've actually adopted a form very similar to Geneva, so it would be no trouble to post it other than remembering. So we can certainly look to do that in
Because
the future.
theirs is just,
If the
it's an
board
Excel spreadsheet.
chooses.
And they just add to it. It goes back years. It goes back years.
I would like to see that, please.
Question for village attorney. I'm kind of recalling some language from the Attorney General that discourages any communication that might discourage FOIA requests. And I'm wondering if this might not fall into that category.
I think, like, you know, you kind of got to live by the sword and die by the sword on FOIA, which is that they're looking for details. I think Trustee Marisak is probably correct, that their name, and you might be able to withhold their address information. but,
Correct.
Their name is certainly going to be fair game.
Well, I'm thinking of the hours involved because that's potentially a publicly humiliating time interval, and it has more to do with what staff reported maybe than the actual question that was asked.
I assume it will be factual, and if it's factual, that, again, is the consequence of the request. I mean, most of the time, what you're going to see is recurrent requesters who are commercial entities looking for, you know, trolling for clients, so to speak.
Marketing
But
information.
they get filtered. Your first question is this a commercial request or
You
not?
could do that, you could say only.
Are we not doing that?
You could limit what you put up if that was your choice. But I think to answer the question fully, Trustee Marisek's point, you could do what he's requesting. Whether you should or not, that's for you to decide.
Any other thoughts or objections before we like to see that on the website, just so people are aware? All right.
And then the other question I had, and we did it at the first meeting, the swearing in, where the Boy Scouts came and did the pledge, or the Cub Scouts did. Does the board do anything as far as community involvement, recognition, type of things for organizations or, you know, like the baseball team? Do we ever actively invite them to come to a meeting and present them, announce it, and walk past and shake everyone's hand? Because that's a life-altering experience to an 8-year-old.
Yeah,
So-
we absolutely, Marilyn used to do that a lot.
Did she? Okay.
So if there's any suggestions of people that you'd like to see come to the meeting, talk to me.
Okay.
In fact, I have one. The group that just helped collect materials for Oklahoma, let's invite them in and recognize what they've done.
Okay. If you can track down their contact
I
information.
can absolutely do that.
All right. Is there any other new or unfinished business? This is actually-
I have one. We're going to be talking about the village manager ordinance soon, and I know last time consideration was given to the newly elected trustees to have access to the executive session recordings for a certain period of time. I think that would help us understand, the new trustees, I think it would help us understand kind of the thinking and where we are and how we've gotten to the place that we're at.
Is anybody opposed to granting that? I think when we did it, when Stan and I were elected, it was a certain period of time.
60 days?
60 days.
Something like
You
that.
guys comfortable 60 days if you want to go? You can listen to the tapes that we have or read the minutes that we have.
And just to be clear, it was 60 days time frame for you to listen to them. I don't think it was a limitation on which minutes you could
Right.
listen to.
But 60 days from now, that doesn't need a vote or anything. Is anybody opposed to allowing that for anybody, actually, for anybody on the board that wanted to review? Okay. You guys can contact staff.
Yeah, just contact us then if you want to come in and listen to them, or if you want to copy the written minutes.
It wouldn't hurt to remind everyone that though that's very confidential information, and we were very much under the guidance of our village attorney in those deliberations.
Absolutely. All right. Hearing nothing else, you can see a laundry list of future meetings that I won't go through. And at this time, I'll entertain a motion to go into executive session to discuss the minutes of the meeting for the purpose of approval by the body of the minutes as mandated by 5 ILCS 120/2 C21, and additionally to discuss the employment of an employee pursuant to 5 ILCS 120/2 C1.
So moved.
Moved by trustee Youngerman, second by trustee Bond. Take the roll, please.
Trustee Youngerman?
Yes.
Trustee Marisak?
Yes.
Trustee Bond?
Yes.
Trustee Spurling?
Yes.
Trustee Lee?
Yes.
Trustee Heinz?
Yes.
I know, right?
Thank you. We're not going to report on closed session minutes today. We'll do that at the next meeting. So I guess I need a motion to table that. Is there a motion?
No, you don't.
You don't?
Just-
Okay, so we're going to skip over that, and I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Second.
Move, second, take the roll, please.
Trustee Heinz?
Yeah.
Trustee Youngerman?
Yeah.
Trustee Marisak?
What's your name?
Doug, that's you.
Got down there.
Yes.
Trustee Bond?
Yes.
Trustee Spurling?
Yes.
Trustee Lee?
And we're adjourned. Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, you want to?
How did my stamp get bigger that I can't get the clip on now?